I was quite skeptical when it was announced that Putin would meet Zelensky. And that's because, first and foremost, that Putin still considers President Zelensky to be illegitimate leader of a fascist regime. Putin still thinks he wins. He needed the summit with Trump to get more time, but that doesn't mean that Russia is willing to provide some concessions or even to stop the fighting. Vladimir Putin might not be ready for peace negotiations. The remaining challenge is still how to stop the current onslaught of Russia. And we're still not there. You see that Putin is unwilling to meet President Zelensky. They're unwilling to stop the war. So what peace is there to guarantee? If there is some kind of territorial concession by President Zelensky, it would be illegal. Trump's behavior with regards to India is a strategic mistake.
Hello and welcome to ANI Interviews. My name is Naman Yadav. Today we have with us is Juraj Majcin. He's a political analyst for defense and security at the European Policy Center. Let me begin with the hot topic that's happening right now. Trump has said, and I quote, "It is possible that Putin doesn't want to make a deal." And in the last couple of days, we have also seen that Kremlin has played down Zelensky talks. There is no such update. Do you think Putin is not ready to make a deal or he doesn't want to make a deal?
So first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be at your podcast and this interview. Yeah, so you're right. President Trump is right that Vladimir Putin might not be ready for peace negotiations. I think we saw a lot of information on there's a lot of things being said since the Alaska summit, where U.S. presidential envoy Steve Witkoff said that there was a game changer and Russia wants to even accept robust security guarantees in exchange for territory. Then we saw this meeting of European leaders, President Zelensky and President Trump in the White House, where European leaders accepted Donald Trump's reframing of the whole debate from an immediate ceasefire to broader peace negotiations. But that's the caveat. To be honest with you, I was quite skeptical when it was announced that Putin would meet Zelensky. And that's because, first and foremost, that Putin still considers President Zelensky to be illegitimate leader of a fascist regime. That's what he said. So even if there were no deliverables from that meeting, just Putin meeting Zelensky would give great legitimacy to President Zelensky in Russia, which I don't think, something I don't think Russia wants. Is the first reason. And second reason that I would say is that although I would say it wasn't not really the best decision to reframe it from ceasefire to broader peace negotiations, but should Putin meet with Zelensky, then people would expect on both sides of the Atlantic in Europe, but also in the US, for Russia to give some concessions, because already Putin was given a lot of things, red carpet treatment from President Trump, then not facing any sanctions or other stronger response Trump was threatening. And now we see they don't want to meet. This was also repeated by Lavrov, Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, who said that we have to be very careful when we talk about high-level meetings like President Zelensky and President Putin. So, of course, Russia doesn't want to meet because they would need to put something on the table, and they're not willing to put that. And honestly, I would also say that this is a bit of a mistake by Donald Trump and sugarcoating of the Russia's position, which was not really in mind for peace. Putin still thinks he wins. He needed the summit with Trump to get more time, but that doesn't mean that Russia is willing to provide some concessions or even to stop the fighting.
So Trump and EU leaders, they have said multiple times that we are working on security guarantees for Ukraine, right? And one wonders, what are the security guarantees?
It's very blurry, the discussion about security guarantees, and it's not new. We've been discussing security guarantees for Ukraine since 2023, since the Vilnius summit at NATO. But more of a general point I would like to make about the security guarantees is that it's good to talk about deterring future Russia's aggression if there is stop of hostilities, if there is a interruption of war, if there's ceasefire. But I think the remaining challenge is still how to stop the current onslaught of Russia. And we're still not there. You see that Putin is unwilling to meet President Zelensky. They're unwilling to stop the war. So what peace is there to guarantee? But okay, let's make a hypothetical situation in which there would be interruption of hostilities, and what kind of security guarantees could be provided to Ukraine. So, of course, the biggest security guarantee is Ukraine's membership of NATO. This has been repeatedly mentioned at NATO communiques, starting back in Bucharest in 2008, saying that that Ukraine would become member of NATO. This was repeated again in last year's summit in Washington, where we came up with this rather strange formulation of Ukraine being an irreversible breach to NATO. And now you see Donald Trump saying that there is no way for Ukraine of joining NATO, and he even left completely U.S. long-standing position, NATO's long-standing position on the so-called open door policy, which basically means that every country that is on the European continent can provide security for the alliance, and the alliance is willing to defend it, should be allowed to join NATO. Trump has said this is not an option, and this also gives win to Russia, because Russia has been saying that Ukraine's NATO membership is so-called root cause of the conflict, which is not true. Ukraine's NATO membership would not threaten Russia, but this is off the table. But I don't think it's a good thing that Trump says that, by the way. I think Ukraine should be a member of NATO. Second, security guarantee that Donald Trump was hinting at, but again, in very blurry, very vague terms and very ambiguous, was and he even said that President Putin is willing to accept NATO Article 5 like guarantees. For Ukraine, Article 5 is that attack on one is an attack on all. So Ukraine would not be a member of NATO, but would have bilateral security guarantees from France, from UK, from the so-called coalition of the willing that would come to help. So it will be part of NATO, but it would come. NATO nations would still come to help. And then the third level of security guarantees is, of course, the coalition of the willing and deployment of troops to Ukraine. So if there is cessation of hostilities, there would be troops from European nations. Donald Trump said that the United States might support it, probably by air support, but he's still not willing to put US troops on the ground, unlike Europeans. Britain and France have said they are willing to put European troops on the ground to check, first of all, that ceasefire is upheld. Of course, we don't have a ceasefire, and its troops won't be there to fight, but also, but mostly to support Ukrainian army. So they will be deployed probably in the western part of Ukraine. And but this is still there is not unity in Europe on what would that entail. First and foremost, because it's not sure because Europe is quite in terms of military capabilities not at the top of its game. So many militaries would be stretched because Ukraine is quite a vast country. Also, there is no clear picture of what mandate would they have. If they are attacked by Russia, would they be allowed to defend themselves? So a lot of questions remain unresolved. And now here comes the big question of what Russia wants here. And I don't think Russia should have veto on any arrangement. But Lavrov, I think, said, and also spokesperson of Russian Foreign Minister Zakharova said that presence of any NATO troops on Ukraine territory is unacceptable to them. So again, this is not true what Americans have been saying, that the Russians are prepared to accept any conditions, any security guarantees in exchange for a ceasefire. And also what Russians said, and they repeated their maximalist condition. If you remember that in March of 2022, there was a summit it was a meeting in Istanbul, where Russia said that they would want to have some veto over Ukraine's security guarantees. So now they say that if there are security guarantees, China and Russia should be part of it, which is, of course, unacceptable to European allies, also Ukraine, that Russia, a country that has attacked Ukraine, would have some say in these negotiations. But I think the discussion overall on security guarantees is quite premature. We have to get the ceasefire first, and then we can talk about security guarantees.
There's a difference between ceasefire and a peace deal. I was reading somewhere an article that Zelensky was pushing for a ceasefire, but Putin and Trump wanted to have a peace deal. Is it right?
Yeah, true. And it wasn't only Zelensky. When you look at the meeting of European leaders on Monday, President Macron of France and Chancellor Merz of Germany have said in their introductory remarks that we have to have a ceasefire, because we can't be talking while this fight is still going on. And I think the major difference here is that Russia knows that if there is a ceasefire, then troops of the coalition will probably move to Ukraine, and that it will be stopped for Russia's war effort. So they know that they can allow to have a ceasefire. And on the other hand, Europeans and to a certain extent Americans also know that if there is no ceasefire and will be just talk with Russia endlessly without any sanctions or more robust response, war will go on. So there is a difference. I think there was a clever move by Putin to persuade Trump to go from a ceasefire to broad discussions about security and defense in Ukraine, so a broader peace agreement, because it allowed Russia to be unpunished. As you remember, on Air Force One, Trump was saying, "I'm confident I get a ceasefire. If not, there will be consequences." But maybe I'm wrong with Donald Trump. And now, as he said that he thinks Putin is again unwilling to go for peace, then we might see some more robust response in terms of secondary sanctions or more robust military aid to Ukraine. This is also what might happen. We need to, because he has tried all the carrots on Russia, and he see that it doesn't deliver. So he also needs to bring some sticks.
In your opinion, what do you think what exactly does Putin want? He has demanded, land swaps as a key condition for peace deal. But do you think Zelensky is ready to give a large portion of Ukraine to Putin?
So first of all, I don't think really that this conflict is about territory. It's a different kind of conflict. Russia still has its maximalist demands. There was a very famous U.S. national security advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, who said in his book Great Chessboard that Russia ceases to be an empire without Ukraine. So since 2014, since Revolution of Dignity, Russia has been consistently trying to get back Kyiv under its control. So I don't think this is about territory, but yet land swaps have been mentioned as part of potential solution, of course, in very ambiguous and blurry way. We don't really know who said what, whether Russia really offered to stop the hostilities. But yeah, it's true that in the 5 occupied regions in eastern Ukraine, southern and eastern Ukraine, Russia said that they could potentially cease the conflict in the south, so in Zaporizhia and Kherson in the south, in exchange for Ukraine's withdrawal from Donetsk, which is in the eastern part of Ukraine. And of course, President Zelensky knows this is a trap, because there is something called Fortress Belt in cities like Kramatorsk or Konstantinivka that are really these cities there are really strongholds against Russia's aggression, and Russia hasn't been able to penetrate those since 2014 even. So this would give Russia's tactical, not only tactical but also strategic advance, possibilities for more lines of advance into Ukraine if hostilities resume. So of course this would be from a military perspective, and also in case there is a coalition of the willing or some kind of security guarantees, this would really deteriorate opportunities, limit our European ability to defend Ukraine in case there is cessation of hostilities. So first, from a military perspective, it wouldn't be a good idea. A second, as you know, Ukraine territory is defined in Ukraine's constitution. If there is some kind of territorial concession by President Zelensky, it would be illegal. Most probably, if Ukrainians opt for this, if we get to a point where Americans would really be willing to get Ukraine what it really wants, so NATO membership, we might probably see Ukraine not acquiescing or giving Russia the legal recognition of its annexation, but maybe de facto sort of acceptance of its annexation. But that would require first that it would have to be authorized by the people of Ukraine, so by a referendum probably, which requires, of course, cessation of hostilities. And second, we're not talking about territory, we're also talking about people. And Mark Rutte has also made this remark about Baltic states that were also occupied by the Soviet Union since the end of the Second World War until basically the end of the Cold War. But they forget that these are people there, and Russia treats those people in not very human ways. They are being deported, children are being separated from their parents. So it's not an area one would want to live in. So we also have to keep this in mind, that giving some territory to Russia is a disaster basically for any country.
Zelensky keeps mentioning, as we spoke about security guarantees, but looking at the history that Ukraine had in 1994, they gave up their nukes, they gave up their nuclear weapons, and we know what happened in 2014, how Russia annexed Crimea. Do you think it's really a tight rope for Ukraine to walk and again to give up territory or to sign a peace deal or ceasefire? They know the entire history of Ukraine and Russia. You cannot really trust Russia as far as security is concerned, and you cannot even trust NATO and US because they had failed to protect Ukraine.
Yeah, I think you're right. The lessons of history, especially the Budapest Memorandum, in which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security reassurance. It was not automatic security guarantees. It was not like Article 5 that if there is an attack against one ally, others would come to its help. No, it was more of a political reassurance by Britain and United States in Budapest in 1994. Russia has violated it, but not this one. It's not. People should keep in mind that getting agreements with Russia is not the main problem. The main problem is to force Russia to abide by those agreements. So you're right. Budapest Memorandum still haunts many Ukrainians, and I think fool me once, shame on me, and fool me twice, shame. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And if Ukrainians accept another Budapest Memorandum, I don't think it will be a strategic move on their part. They know it. They know now that any concession to Russia without Article 5 really like guarantees, or even Ukraine's NATO membership, would be hard to sustain, because Russia would for Russia any peace is basically a pause before another escalation, and they need to have credible security guarantees for any big concession like this.
So Trump has ruled out any chances of sending US troops to Ukraine as far as security guarantees are concerned. Do you think Europe alone is capable of protecting Ukraine?
That's a very good question, and I think what U.S. president, it was basically a premature capitulation, because on the one hand you can't say that we can provide Article 5 like guarantees, which means U.S. help like boots on the ground, and then you roll out U.S. boots on the ground, and I think it also has to do with the MAGA base, because he campaigned on ending the wars. He wants to win a peace prize, and putting U.S. troops on the ground, in his mind, doesn't align with that. So it will be very difficult for Europeans to put a force to Ukraine without U.S. backstop. It's not that Europeans wouldn't be able to put some troops on the ground. I think Europeans would be able to do it, although our capabilities might be stretched. But I think in terms of some peace verification mission, maybe not combat mission, because there will be too much, I think that could work. France, UK, and other 8 countries have suggested that they might send some troops there. But I think what Europeans want is some assurance from the United States that if these troops there, that will be there to protect the ceasefire, to check the ceasefire, are attacked, then the United States would come to their help. And this is also part of NATO's sort of psyche, that you can do things. Europeans are willing to do things, but U.S. reassurance is also something that makes us more agile, more dynamic in Europe. And if Donald Trump doesn't understand it, and it's not, I'm not saying it's right. I think Europe should be able to take care of its own security, but also given the current circumstances, I think Donald Trump should be able to provide more robust security guarantees. And if he sees that Europeans are really willing to do something to give some reassurance to Europeans, not only air support, as he was hinting, or intelligence trade, but also some limited U.S. presence, would I think be a huge encouragement, and would also put more pressure on Moscow.
How do you see Trump's decision to slap 50% tariff on India? The White House said these sanctions were meant to end the war, but there are no sanctions and no tariffs on China and EU and they keep buying on Russian oil, minerals, gas since the war began.
Yeah, you know, honestly, I haven't been following the situation on this front, that trade policy, that closely. But I think Trump's behavior with regards to India is strategic mistake. I think it alienates India. India is a important partner, of course. India also buys minerals and oil from Russia, also Russian military equipment. So and has also some different views when it comes to war in Ukraine. But I don't think it's the right. It's the right to alienate India and putting so high tariffs on India while not punishing China, which also which supplies semiconductors to Russia's drones that are used in Ukraine. 80% of all microelectronics found in Russian drones is supplied from China. So and there's no serious consequences for China for doing that. So I don't see a reason why Trump administration is alienating India in this way. I think we should keep India as close as possible.
At the end, I want to ask you your prediction. Can we see a ceasefire or peace deal soon? Or Putin is gonna take his sweet time and make sure that he gets the bigger cut and he gets everything he wants?
So that's I don't, well, it depends what you mean by soon. Of course, Russia, although it's a big country, but also it struggles with recruiting new forces, and they lose thousands of soldiers per week for really minimal advances. So it's a huge drain on Russia's resources. Russia's economy is also not doing particularly well. So I think a ceasefire would benefit Russia, as well as, of course, Ukraine. It also struggles with manpower and is also tired. The whole population is tired by war. So I think when it comes to objective conditions for ceasefire on both sides, I think there is interest. There should be interest on both sides to stop hostilities for some time. Whether we see this happening, I'm quite skeptical, because there's this big strategic discussion. For Russia, it would mean that they would probably have to accept European troops on the ground, which would be the end of Russia's ambition in Ukraine. And if this is not happening, then Ukraine, I don't think they would stop fighting, because if this war can be finished quite soon. If Russia stops its war, withdraws its troops from Ukraine, then there's no end to war. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine, it's over for Ukraine as an independent state. So their stakes are much higher than Russia's stakes here.
Thank you, Jure. Thank you for having a conversation with the NI. It was really nice speaking to you.
Thank you so much.